G'day, Dave here, and thanks for listening. We're looking at Matthew chapter 7 and verses 13 and 14. And I want to thank you for following along, checking out what the Bible has to say, exploring the gospel about Jesus Christ. Good on you for doing that, whether you're a Christian and just wanting to know Jesus better, or whether you're an inquirer, maybe even a skeptic, who's got issues, you've got questions, and you'd really like to find out what Jesus is on about. Well, this is a great place to start, and there is so much in this Gospel of Matthew. One of the difficult questions I think that we come up against as we explore the Christian faith is, what about others? What about those who don't believe in Jesus? What about different religions? I mean, yes, there are billions of Christians in the world, but there's a heck of a lot of Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists and Zoroastrians and all kinds of other religions, and there are agnostics. And there are atheists. What about all of these different ideas? And the idea of Christianity claiming to be the right way, the truth path, that if you come to Jesus, then you'll be right with God. And if you go to Buddha, you won't be. If you go via Muhammad, you won't be. If you follow any of the millions and squillions of different Hindu gods, you won't be. That just doesn't sound right, does it? It's insensitive to our ears to speak about exclusive truth or one way. And I understand some of that tension. I mean, we want to recognize in humility that we don't have a mortgage on the truth, that we as fallible human beings don't know everything. And as I come to the Bible, as I've been a Christian now for 50 years, I'm still asking questions. I'm still trying to resolve issues. I've still got problems that I'm working through. And there is a sensitivity to how come there is one way, and isn't there a possibility that there might be many? Well, Jesus is actually the source of this idea that there is one way. And I want to read to you, though, two verses from Matthew chapter 7. "Enter through the narrow gate," he said, "for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." Now, there are so many contrasts, polar opposites in these two verses. The first is the nature of the gate. Enter through the narrow gate because the gate is small and the road is narrow that leads to life. Whereas don't enter through the wide gate because the wide gate leads to a broad road that ends up in destruction, and many people go that path. So it's saying in effect here that if you're going to enter into the kingdom of heaven that Jesus is teaching about, you need to find that small gate, go along that difficult path if you're going to find life. So you've got to start the right way, you've got to continue the right way to get to the right destination. Because if you go in the wrong way and follow down that easy path, it will lead to destruction. So what Jesus is saying really is a couple of things. That is, there's one way to be right with him, and it won't be easy, but it will lead to life eternal. Now, that is an insensitive and probably perceived as an arrogant statement of Jesus to our 21st century ears. We are much more comfortable, by and large, with the idea that Christianity is good, but it's one good idea amongst many. If you're into religion at all, then surely you want to have a willing acceptance also of Buddhism or of Hinduism or of Islam or of some other religion. Surely there's got to be acceptance, and it can't be that Christians have a mortgage on the truth. Surely they need to recognize that, yes, they've grown up in a particular way of life. They've got a certain cultural background. They've been influenced by certain factors that lead them to Christianity as the way to God, but others have followed through a path to Islam or to Buddhism or Hinduism or some other way. But friends, this doesn't logically follow. The reality is, when you think about it, if there is a destination, now let's put it as the passage does, if there are two destinations, and there are two paths leading in different directions, it matters absolutely whether you go through the right gate. Now, Jesus is saying more than just a metaphor of entry and direction and destination, because in John's Gospel, Jesus describes himself as the gate or as the door. He describes himself as the way or as the road. He is the way, he is the truth, he is the life. And he says, no one comes to the Father, that is God the Father, except by him. So Jesus isn't giving some kind of metaphor, some kind of general statement about different paths and different religions. He's actually talking about himself. Jesus is the gate. Jesus is the pathway. And if we're going to come to know God, then we need to come to know God as he has revealed himself. And God says he's come into the world as Emmanuel, God with us in Jesus Christ. And if we want to enter into the kingdom of heaven, then we must do so by coming to Jesus and trusting in Jesus and following Jesus if we are to arrive at eternal life. It's Jesus or nothing, according to Jesus. Now, at that point, that's a pretty arrogant thing to claim, isn't it? I mean, for Jesus to stand up and say, look, nobody comes to God unless they come through me. That you won't get into and participate in the kingdom of heaven unless you follow my direction. It's a very arrogant thing to say. And that puts an end to the nonsense that Jesus is just a good teacher. I mean, he's not a good teacher unless he's telling the truth. And if he's telling the truth, then really he's God amongst us. Otherwise, it's just a deluded man or a narcissistic tyrant. No, Jesus is not just a good teacher. He's saying that he is the way to get access to God. And more than that, he's saying he is the only way. Now, we have a problem, I know, with this sense of exclusivity. But let me give you another picture to think about. Think about the coronavirus at the moment. I mean, responsibility for statistics are saying close to 40 million people, but others are saying that might be only 10% of those who've been affected by the virus. And the tolls for deaths as a result of this, they're now well over 1 million. It's pretty horrific what's been going on. And so many countries are banking on a virus. And so scientists and pharmaceutical companies and governments and big business and all kinds of the finest minds and the deepest pockets are investing in finding a vaccine. Now imagine that vaccine is found. How are you going to respond when that vaccine is offered? You're going to say thank you? Or are you going to say, well, surely there should be other options? Surely there can't be just one vaccine? And start to criticize those who have offered the vaccine that will give hope of protection from the virus, saying surely it just has to be one way among many. Or if you don't like the illustration from the coronavirus, let me share with you my story. That is, I have a lung cancer that's driven by a particular genetic mutation, and I am so thankful for the scientific minds that were able to understand what's gone wrong at a chromosome level in my body and have been able to produce a drug to flip that around and stop cancer from growing. It's an extraordinary thing that I've been offered through the investment of others. The last thing on my mind would be to say to them, well, aren't there a variety of options that I could take? And I'm going to hold back because maybe there's some truth in every one. Now, if something is genuinely offering life, you take it, you grab hold of it. And the question, when it comes to Christianity, when it comes to the kingdom of heaven, is whether Jesus is the real thing. Because if he is, he claims to be the way. He claims to be the gate. He claims to be the very body, being through which we come to know God. Will you trust Jesus?